It's about practicing this idea of not putting your thoughts on what is missing and shifting it to, it's on its way. It's on its way. It's on its way. 4 words, just get them tattooed someplace inside of you. Whatever it is that you would like to attract into your life, know that it's on its way. And I want to say to you that as you begin to get your thoughts more harmonized with Tao thinking, that is, with the thinking of the source, the thinking of God, that which always has been, that which does nothing but leaves nothing undone, as you begin to more and more harmonize in this way, what happens is that you start elevating your thoughts so that the habit of how you think becomes more harmonized. Rather than a polarity with what you want to attract, it becomes harmonized with it, and it becomes your natural way of how you think all the time. And you start then beginning to teach your children the same way of thinking. So you just catch them when they start saying things like, oh, with my luck it won't work out. Why have any of us ever learned to say, with my luck, and having it mean things aren't going to work out? Why wouldn't you say, and just have it as your habit, with my luck, it'll probably show up faster than it normally does? Why not have that kind of a way? Because here's what happens. As you begin to shift the way that you think and have an anticipation that this thing is going to work out for you, you can only act upon your thoughts. And as you get these higher and higher thoughts, what happens is that the thought is now more aligned with what it is you want to attract, and then you start acting upon that thought. And as you start acting upon the thought that it will work out, that it's probably on its way, you start to see how this whole system all works. In other words, call it the universe, whatever you want, begins to conspire with you. It begins to act almost where you suddenly become a collaborator with fate. And instead of fate being something that just might or might not happen to you, you're in collaboration with what it is that you want to attract. I mean, ask any physician, there's physicians here today, ask them about something called the will to live. Ask them about somebody who's going in for a corneal transplant and thinks that I'm going to see when this thing is done, rather than someone who thinks it probably won't work out. And which one would they rather work with? What is this thing called the will to live? What is this thing, this inner kind of thing that says, I refuse to allow myself to think? And they've done research on this, in studies on gerontology, where what does your life look like from 60 plus versus what does your life look like below, from 60 down to into your 20s? That people who live a dynamic life into their 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, people who feel strong, who don't feel that getting older means that I have to in any way decline any place, physically or mentally. Getting older has nothing to do with the concept of declining. That when people are in their 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s, and this is their perception of what their life is going to be like when they are in their 60s, that those people have a much greater chance of not attracting the kinds of diseases that are so much age-related as do people who think of old as infirm and declining throughout their 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. That you change the way you believe about that and you say declining is not a possibility. And we can create the kind of world that we want to create when enough of us begin to say, not part of my consciousness. Nope, I don't buy gossip. No, I don't buy violence. No, I don't have anything to do with that. And you just turn the channel, you turn it off. I pick up a Time magazine when I get on a flight and I go through and I say, I won't read the stories that involve killing. I won't read this. I don't need to hear any more about any more people blowing themselves up. I don't need to continue to have that as a part of my consciousness, because I want to be someone who radiates out God-realized thinking. That's what I want to do. And I can't do that if I'm constantly being imbued with that. So I just go through the pages, page. And usually I say, oh, just threw away another $4.95. There's nothing in it to read. Every once in a while, a good story about maybe Tiger Woods or something, but by and large, there's not much in there. And you don't have to fill yourself with that kind of energy. The solution for me represents the ability to bring to your life something that can make these things called problems disappear, dissolve, and nullify. And that is what I spoke about when I opened up here a little while ago about energy. Energy comes in the form of fast and slow, high and low. And higher and faster energy nullifies lower and slower energy. A room full of darkness. Darkness is a lower and a slower energy, if you measure it, than is light. And when you bring light to the presence of a dark room, the darkness disappears, and that is a metaphor for every single one of the problems and concerns and struggles that you are facing in your life. And way back, 800 years ago, there lived a little man who gave up all of his possessions. He lived in a little village in Italy, near Florence, called Assisi. And we named one of our most famous cities in America after him. His name was Francesco, or as he became known later after his passing, St. Francis of Assisi. And I went to Assisi, and I had miracles that took place for me in visiting Assisi on several occasions. And St. Francis was one of these people who created a prayer that is perhaps the most well-known prayer on the planet today, certainly one of them. How can I become an instrument of thy peace? The ego is the part of us that wants to be at war, that wants to defeat, that wants to collect, that wants to be better than, that wants to always get more. The sacred or the highest part of ourselves is the part of us that just wants to be at peace. How can I become an instrument of peace? Not someone who's looking for peace, but someone who delivers it. There are opportunities every day. I was in a gas station just a few days ago, and in this gas station they had a car wash. And there was a young boy, he was maybe 18 or 19 years old, and he didn't speak English very well, and he couldn't figure out how to work the car wash. And he had put $2 in, and apparently it required $3. And he was in there waiting to pay for his car wash and trying to get an answer to why he couldn't get it to work. And I had just gotten some gasoline, and I walked in, and there was this man behind the counter berating this young boy and humiliating him and talking to him. And because he didn't understand the language, he talked louder to him. You know how people do that? You know, if someone doesn't understand you, you say, what I said is, and they say, I don't understand, and then you say it even louder. Well, that's what he was doing to this young boy. And I saw this is an opportunity right here, in this instant, to be an instrument of peace. And I put my arm around the young man, and I said, come with me. And I walked out to the machine, and I took $1, and I put it into and he walked away, and he was just so happy. One tiny little incident. These kinds of things, I suggest to you that you take this day and look for 5 occasions to be an instrument of peace. And you'll find one when you're on your way home, on the freeway. You'll find somebody who isn't going to let you get in. You find somebody who doesn't want to let you pass. And instead of giving them a hard time or being angry at them, try sending something called peace their way. There's a wonderful line that I have on the dashboard of my car. It says, I can choose peace rather than this. And it's always a reminder that no matter how what I'm experiencing in my life, I want to be an instrument of peace. It's been said that the 3 most difficult things to do in the world are this. The first is to send love in response to hatred. The second is to defend the absent. That is, whoever's being gossiped about, you become their spokesperson. I do this with my children all the time when they're all saying this, and then she said that, and he said that. I'll say, excuse me, but who is defending the absent person here? Well, why should anybody defend her? I'll say, well, I'll just take her position right now, if you don't mind. And the third is to admit when you were wrong. And it doesn't mean necessarily to say, I just made a mistake. It means to say, I have been making the wrong kinds of choices in my life with my mind. I've been putting my attention on what I don't want, on what others want for me, on what the world ought to be, on what it used to be, and I can't understand why it just keeps showing up, what I don't want, what others want for me, what I despise. I have to admit, almost I have to rewrite my agreement with reality. And so much of what St. Francis was speaking about back in the 13th century, because he was a man who was ridiculed wherever he went. And he was just out there trying to teach people to bring the solution, spiritual solution to your problems. If hatred is existing in your world, that's an energy field. It's a lower and a slow energy than the energy of love. If you can bring love to the presence of that hatred, it will be nullified just as if you were bringing light to darkness. But for most of us, what we do when we see hatred is we respond in kind to that hatred. Whatever choice you make in every interaction you have, make the choice to be at peace, your sacred or higher self says. Whereas your ego says, oh, no. It's much more important to be right. And so we find people in relationships struggling a lot. And one of the things that they struggle about is who's right and who's wrong. Most of the fights that you have in your relationships really basically, oftentimes you forget the details. But it's basically about who's right and who's wrong. So that if you want to have your higher or your sacred part of you ruling in your life, I suggest this to you. Practice being kind rather than right. When you have the choice. And you have the choice in your relationships with your spouse and your ex-spouse, with your parents, with your grandparents, with your in-laws, with strangers on the freeway, with flight attendants, with waiters, with whomever you interact. If you can just subdue this ego part of you which says, it's important for me to be right, which will introduce you to stress and anxiety and fear and so much of the stuff that I talked about earlier, and instead say, how can I suspend this part of me and allow the part of me that wants to be at peace, that wants to be happy, that wants to be fulfilled. And if I said to you, I'm going to give you a magic wand, and with this magic wand, I am going to allow you to just wave it and get anything that you want. Whatever you want. You can have this, you can have this car, you can have these nice clothes over here, you can have this home, whatever it is. Or I said to you, in lieu of that, I'm going to give you another wand, and you can wave this, and for every moment for the rest of your life, you'll be at peace. Whatever comes along, you'll be able to choose peace. And basically, we know that we're only here for a very short time. And being able to choose peace, which is what the sacred part of you begs you, the higher self. Once you get that, you begin to shift away, and you stop telling yourself that the people who are close to me, in relationship with me, are the people who don't belong there. I remember my wife and I, we often talk about this, and we've been together a long time. We've had many children together, and we have a very wonderful, loving relationship. Thank you. But we'd often, and one time I said to her, or she said to me, you know, we love each other, but this doesn't sound like love. Sometimes the way we talk to each other doesn't sound like love. Let's practice with each other, being kind rather than being right. And it was transformative. That when we had that walk, and doing that with your children, and doing that with a waiter. I mean, a waiter who comes to you and is like, hassled and frazzled and has been busy and all of that, and your ego says, wait a minute, I'm here and I'm important, and I have a right to be served, and I have a right to be served now. That's the ego part of you. If you can suspend that and say, you are a lucky man tonight. You got somebody who's dealing from his sacred self. And I understand. And you take your time, and you come to me, and you bring it at your convenience, whenever you can. I'm willing to suspend and you know what? You'll get served so fast, and with such gratitude, just for being kind, if you practice it. Every single one of us are in relationship, whether it's with our husbands and wives, with our ex-husbands and wives, with our children, our grandchildren, whether it's with people we drive along the freeway next to, whether it's with waiters and waitresses or baggage handlers or flight attendants or people that we are in line to get into the movie. We're all in relationships, and we interact with each other all the time.
And probably the best lesson that I've ever learned in my life about how to be in a relationship in a way which is powerful and happy and fulfilling is to remember this sentence. When you have a choice, and you always do, to be right or to be kind, start picking kind. The ego part of us wants to be right. How dare you not serve me as fast as I think I deserve to be served? How dare you say something to me? And immediately we want to make that other person wrong and make ourselves right. But there's a part of each one of us that wants to be happy, wants to be at peace. And that part of us says, it doesn't matter whether you're right. It doesn't matter about your ego. All you want is to be at peace, so pick kind. This kind of an attitude, if we had more of this, not only in our own personal lives, would we improve virtually every relationship we have with all of the people closest to us and all of the strangers we interact with. But on our planet as well, we would begin to understand the wisdom that on a round planet, there's no choosing up sides, that we're all one. We're all breathing the same air. We're all drinking the same water. We're all being warmed by the same sun. And as they say, as the Native Americans used to say, no tree has branches so foolish as to fight among themselves. It applies in your relationships, and it applies as a people as well.
You begin to sense there's trouble ahead. And so you look at a group of people that are standing on a corner and you think that could be trouble. And your intuition says, run around them rather than next to them. And you run and you avoid that. And something tells you when you're walking out of a parking lot, there's some intuitive sense that says, I think I should have somebody accompany me when I'm doing this. And you listen to that intuition. Sometimes it isn't there and it's not necessary. When it's there, you pay attention. You begin, synchronicity isn't any more confusing than the thought that exists between a mother and her baby. It's not any more difficult to understand than the idea of a remote control in your television set. And when we then have these synchronistic events in which we access our intuition, and what I'm suggesting is that when you reach these higher frequencies, intuition, insight, creativity, all of these things become negotiable. You can access them. You have the knowing. Because when you form a picture in your head of what you would like to attract into your life, you can begin to attract abundance and virtually anything else that you put your attention on. It's a law of the universe. Get that picture. See yourself as if you already are what you'd like to become. And every great artist, every great thinker is able to do just that. They have been able to see themselves as completing something. Do you know how difficult it is for so many people who get into a doctoral program? I think the statistics are that out of every 10 people admitted into a PhD program, 1 completes it. 9 out of 10 never complete it because they can't picture themselves writing a dissertation. The reason that I knew when I entered the doctoral program and was told that 9 out of 10 don't complete it, I already saw myself as having my doctorate. And I just knew that that was something that I had to do. And I suggest that there are people right in here, there are physicians in here, who probably entered medical school. There's a lady right here in the front who entered medical school. How many women who enter medical school complete the entire process and become medical doctors and have a practice? It's getting higher, but the statistics are against you as you enter something like that. But if you see yourself as having a practice, you see yourself as a healer, you see yourself as someone who is capable of becoming a doctor, or anything else in your life, if you see it and get that picture, and I can't tell you, I try to teach this to my children, my daughter who wants to sing, I just said, sing. See yourself as a singer. Get that picture, and no matter what comes your way, don't ever let anybody ever tell you that it won't happen. You can let them tell you, And all you have to do is use that as a way to step into the gap and then out of the gap over here into the world of spirit and bring that energy of knowing, that energy of insight, that energy of intuition. Are you listening, Jennifer? Because if you have that picture, there's nothing that can stop you. And you don't evaluate whether or not you are successful on the basis of whether people buy your CDs. That's the biggest mistake you could make. Or whether people read your books. Or whether people want to come and hear your lectures or buy your tapes. You don't do it that way. You evaluate whether or not you are a success by being one of those people who's on the road that's hardly ever crowded and enjoying everything that they do because they're seeing themselves as someone who couldn't be any place else. And you no longer find enlightenment through suffering. You no longer find enlightenment through having an awareness in the moment of what it is that you need to do to learn the lesson that's happening for you right now. You are now a person who's out in front of yourself, and you see it coming. And that makes you a master who lives coincidences, not in the sense of them being accidents, but having a perfect fit.
I think the most important thing that you can get out of this is to understand that you are a choice-making individual, and that all of the conditions that you find yourself in your life, all of the circumstances of your life, all of the emotional reactions that you have to all of the people and all of the things and events and so on that take place in your life are really choices. And that's a very difficult thing for a lot of people to get, because they're raised to believe that I can't help the way I feel. I have a right to be miserable when somebody treats me in a certain way. I can't help it. I've always been that way. It's just my nature. It's just the kind of person that I am.
This waiter was directly from Italy and was serving this wonderful pasta and all of these things. And he was a madman. He was a maniac. Every customer was getting him all upset. He would talk to the other head waiters and running back and forth and getting himself all worked up. Finally, I said, come on over here. He said, what are you doing this for? I do this all the time. You do therapy wherever you go, right? I said, what are you taking this so serious? All you're doing is serving spaghetti. It's no big deal. I said to him, you know, before you're 50 years old, you're going to have a heart attack. Guarantee it, if you continue to behave that way every day. He said, look, what do you expect from me? I'm Italian. So, well, that explains it. I mean, his rationale for his behavior was, I can't do anything about it, I inherited it. You know, I just got deficient anger genes. I mean, I've heard kids say that, you know, when they're failing math. I can't help it. My father was lousy at math, my grandfather was, I inherited, you know, deficient math genes. It's just not my fault. I can't do anything about it. The fact is that anything that goes on inside of you that is immobilizing, that gets in your way, that keeps you from functioning in the ways that you would like to function, that stops you from reaching your goals, whatever they may be in your life, anything inside, you choose. It's yours. You own it all. And if you don't like anything about yourself, anything, are you shy? Are you nervous? Are you afraid? Are you somebody who can't handle getting up in front of groups because it scares you? Are you someone who gets angry too much? Do you find yourself being manipulated and controlled by other people too often? Are you afraid to stand up for what you believe? Are you a terrible cook? Are you lousy at tennis? You haven't got a backhand? Whatever it may be, it doesn't make any difference. You are the sum total of the choices that you make in your life. If you don't buy that, if you buy into another system, which a lot of psychologists will teach you, which is, it's in your unconscious. You can't help it. After all, you're a middle child. What do you expect from a middle child? You know, certainly can't have any identity of your own. Or maybe you're an only child. Oh, God. Maybe you're the youngest of 12. You had 11 parents, all your life. Somebody telling you what to do from the time or maybe you were the oldest and you had to be a parent for 9 others or whatever. You can use any excuse that you want, or you can just say, the devil made me do it, or it's God's fault. A lot of people blame God. God and mother are most responsible for all of the things that are wrong with us, The classic, the one I heard over and over and over again in all the years, and I announced it on network television one night. I said, I came here tonight for one reason. I want to tell everybody in America that your mother liked your sister better. I heard it every day for 20 years. It must be true. I can't do it. My mother liked my sister better. No wonder I can't. She was the one that got all the attention. I didn't get anything. Her pictures and all the photographs. Nothing for me. I know some of you don't have a sister and you think, well, then that's not the reason. She wanted one. Really. And she would have liked her better. I guarantee it, It's taking responsibility for everything that goes on in your life, which is what Wayne Dyer is about, if you really want to take it home to anybody else. No blame is allowed for anything that goes on in your life. Virtually everything in your life boils down to what kinds of attitudes, what kinds of beliefs do you have about any given situation. You try to set your expectations in such a way so that you understand that your life is nothing more than a series of choices.
So if we begin to shift our statements, the statements first of all that we say to ourselves, and then the statements that we say because and so what I want everybody who's listening today to do is to take a look at all of the things in your life that you don't like, that aren't working the way you would like them to work, whether it's in your relationships, whether it's financial, whether it's with your health, whether with your job, with your friendships, or whatever it might be. And instead of saying, and when you ask yourself, now, how did it come to be this way? Kind of go back and go all the way back as far as you can go to even being a young boy or a young girl. And how many times have you heard or said the words that were predictive of this showing up in your life? And then get to a place where you start to change that around. And you have not only a different set of expectations, but a different way of making decrees, so that you decree that things are going to work out, that your prosperity is on its way, that your relationship is going to improve, that your health is something that you have control over. I'll give you an example of this, and then we'll open up to the phones. My daughter Serena is here, who's written a book called Don't Die With Your Music Still In You. It's a book that I give out on the show to people who call in, my experience growing up with spiritual parents. And she has a new little baby. Her baby's name is Sailor, and Sailor is 3 months old. Now, Sailor has something called acid reflux, so that her stomach, so when she's nursing or when she gets her bottle or whatever it is, she starts throwing up a lot. Now, my daughter Serena has had this her entire lifetime, from the time that she was a little girl, and her mother, my wife, also had that when she was a young girl. It's this thing called acid reflux, okay? And they have little prescriptions for it, Prilosec and things like that people take. It's sort of predictive of what Serena has experienced for herself in her whole life. So I said to her yesterday, I said, honey, do you realize that that little baby who came out of you shares your DNA and shares your blood and is as, just because the cord has been cut, but is just as connected to you, spiritually and metaphysically and mentally, is just as connected to you as if she were inside of your womb. And that you had this experience yourself, and rather than already setting up this decree that Sailor's going to have, this is just something she's going to have to struggle with. My mother had it. She has, I had it, and now now she's going to have it. I said, you have the capacity to communicate with her and begin to program into her subconscious mind from the time that she, and every time you look at her and see her, she can, when you look at her, she looks at you different than anybody else because you're her mother, and she looks into your eyes and all that. And instead of telling her that you have acid reflux and I'm really sorry, I'm going to give you more milk than you need and you're going to have this for a lifetime, I said, you have the power to heal this. To put your hand on her stomach and on her throat, and when she's taking this, instead of convincing yourself that this child is going to have this for a lifetime, I want you to begin to just say to yourself, I can heal this for you, honey, and talk to her like this. And I put my hand on her stomach and I said, you're such a sweet baby, and you don't have to have this throwing up stuff, and you don't have anything called acid reflux. You're perfectly healthy. You're a divine creation. You are perfect. Mommy's going to be here for you and show you exactly how to deal with this, and start programming her subconscious mind right now so that when words do begin to develop within her, and she speaks first in words and then in sentences, what you're going to say is that you don't have this. This is just a minor little obstacle, and it's not anything that's going to dominate your life. And read your sister's book, Goodbye Bumps, because she was able to do the very same thing by shifting her consciousness around. So, we get programmed from the time that we're little, about what we can do and what we can't do, how fast we can run, how much we can lift, how athletic that we are, how good we are at mathematics, how, whether or not we're coordinated, whether we can dance, whether we can do a headstand, whether we get, it's just almost every few minutes of our life, there are these decrees coming out of us. And you don't want to have any decree coming out of you that isn't predictive of what you would like to attract and create for yourself, versus a decree that says, it's going to be difficult, I can't make it happen, my luck is never going to work out, I've been sick, this runs in our family, my mother had it, my grandmother had it, and on and on and on and on it goes.